Hey, everybody. Welcome to another Playful Humans podcast. I'm your host, Mike Montague, and my guest this week is author of Food Americana and creator of Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives. Triple D, it's David Page. We're going to talk with him about what it's like to play for a living. And if you need a little more fun, flow, and fulfillment in your life, or you need to remember and rediscover the power of play, go to playfulhumans.com. We have a club. We have a fun quiz where you can find out what your playful personality is and what you like to do for fun. And check it out, playfulhumans.com. You can find the new book, by the way, Food Americana, anywhere books are sold, and find them on Facebook and Instagram. Here we go. Now the woohoos. All right, David, welcome to the podcast. We like to start with the joke of the week here. The joke of the week is brought to you by nutritional information. Having nutritional information on things like a bag of Cheetos is like having dating advice on a shoebox of Crocs. Nutritional information. All right. I came up with some food jokes for you today. Have you heard about the new restaurant in Kansas City called Karma? There's no menu. You don't order. You just get what you deserve. All right. That's as good as I can do.
But seriously, Johnny, I got to tell you, I just flew in from Chicago and boy, are my arms tired. How are you, Mike?
I'm good. I've only done like 75 of these interviews and I still haven't gotten the rim shot for my bad jokes. I like the awkward silence instead. So I guess, the two projects really we're talking about today are food-based. So my first question to you would be like, how did you learn that you can play and have fun with food? And when did it kind of become your passion? Was there a seminal moment or an aha for you?
There was a seminal period of time. I was sent to Europe by NBC News in the mid-'80s to cover Europe, Africa, and the Middle East. And I pretty quickly figured out, and I was totally unprepared to live overseas. It had never occurred to me. I was rather insular, xenophobic, not politically, but mentally. And I got over to Europe and I realized I don't know anything about anything. And I pretty quickly figured out that food was the gateway to other cultures, that it told you a tremendous amount about the country and about its people. And it certainly was a great venue for, it's a social lubricant. So it was a great way to meet and talk to people of other cultures. When I moved back to the States, I realized I had been enjoying all of this food in restaurants, but I had been traveling so much that I had a brand new kitchen in my apartment in Frankfurt. It was a brand new apartment. And I realized when I left Europe 4 years later, I had never used it. I had not turned on my oven. And it just occurred to me when I moved back to New York, this cooking thing might be interesting. And I literally just started the hard way by making frequently inedible dishes that over time got a little better. And I dropped the ones that I couldn't master from my repertoire. But no, food became a very enjoyable activity. Yes, I love eating food and I love good food and that's wonderful. But the making of food became something that I did and still do for fun. I mean, the other day, finally, after getting vaccinated and unaware that I would later catch COVID anyway, my wife and I got out of the house and had social interaction for the first time with another couple of friends here on this little island we live on. We went to their house, we hugged, we had wine, and then he made cacio e pepe, which is,
Heard of it.
You're shaking, okay. It is a classic Roman dish. Okay, there's arguments in Italy about whether it started in Rome, but I'm not going to get into that. The bottom line is it's associated with Rome. It is the simplest pasta dish on earth in that it's bucatini pasta with basically remarkable Italian cheese, not Parmesan, which I will now, of course, freak out and not remember which cheese. Anyway, and fresh cracked pepper that has been opened up by cooking in a pan. I had not had it before. I loved it. My wife loved it. Before we left, our friend gave me the printed out instructions that he used because he had not had it before. And on the way home, my wife said, "This is fantastic. Let's have it again." So the next night I made it. And, you know, it's that sort of, or the other day I invented a dish by accident. I was going to do braised chicken thighs in sort of a cilantro-based sauce. And I had the sauce ready. I had everything going. I had the vegetables simmering. And I opened the refrigerator and I looked inside and I said to my wife, "What happened to the chicken thighs?" She said, "I put them in the freezer. I didn't think you were going to use them." So now I have a sauce going and nothing to put in it. And I look up and there's a very expensive package of tenderloin, you know, filet mignon.
Nice, yeah.
So I threw those in and turned the heat way down. And 3 hours later, I had some of the finest tournedos de boeuf that I had ever accidentally made. So that's my approach to cooking. It probably won't kill you, so give it a shot.
Well, I think that's really, you know, should be your approach to life, right?
In all things except skydiving.
There you go. Well, if at first you don't succeed, skydiving is not for you.
Yeah.
So if chronologically, then you know, discover a passion for food and you're in television. Tell us the story of Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives, because it's been a very popular show for a long time.
Well,
And,
you would think
really
it was
cool.
done on purpose. It was a complete Hail Mary pass. What happened is I came back to the States, still in network news, as a show producer now. Network news started to go some places I didn't want to go. I was producing Good Morning America. I was a line producer, which means subject to the executive producer. Once every 3 weeks, the show was mine. And I'm sitting at the rim, the desk, getting ready for the next day's show and trying to stay awake. And the EP comes up to me and says, "There's going to be $1 million winner on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire tonight. And he's going to appear in the first half hour tomorrow." At which point I said to myself, "This is not the business I'm into. Put him on the show, maybe, certainly not in the first half hour." And again, my criticisms of network news are no, it's not fake news. No, it's not intentionally biased. But generally speaking, that was the beginning of a slide in what I saw to be news judgment and standards. And I wanted to get out. So I made the insane mistake of saying yes when I got recruited to become the senior vice president and executive producer of a home shopping channel that was based in Minneapolis. And if you want to talk about moral issues with what you're putting on the air, I pretty quickly figured out that selling overpriced gold jewelry to shut-ins in Queens was not my thing.
I was going to say, you went from like questionably selling out to 100%.
To completely selling. Well, no, but no. But understand, in my mind, there is one difference.
Yeah, it's up front.
At least the new job didn't pretend to be something else.
Right.
My issue with what was happening to news was it professed a certain set of standards and then intentionally failed to meet them. I knew what I was doing. I figured, look, there's nothing incredibly definitionally wrong about being in business. The home shopping wasn't for me. So I left and I opened a production company, which means you're now unemployed and you have a message on your phone that says, "Hi, you've reached Page Productions." And I couldn't sell anything. I was going to starve. Well, not starve. I had a pretty good goodbye deal from the home shop. Anyway, would have lasted a few years. But what I did is I called Al Roker. I had co-created the weekend editions of the Today Show. And Al started out on our show before he went to the main show. So I called Al, who had a production company, still does. And I said, "Listen, I'm in business for myself and I'm starving. Have you got any work?" And he said, "Yeah, I'm doing a lot of stuff for the Food Network. You want to take on some of that?" So I said, "Sure." And I started doing things for Al's show at the time on the Food Network, Roker on the Road. But more importantly, he started subcontracting hour-long documentaries to me, including one on the history of diners. Down the road, when it was clear that for me to make any significant money or grow my production company, I was going to have to deal with them directly, not as a subcontractor. So I started pitching the Food Network directly. Again, unsuccessful as hell. I would call and this very pleasant executive would talk to me and she'd say, what do you got? And I'd go through a bunch of stuff and she'd say, no, but thanks. And this went on for a long time. Finally, one day I'm on the phone with her pitching. And she's saying, no. When she remembers that I did that documentary, whoops, I knocked something over, that I did that documentary on diners. And she says to me, don't you have anything else on diners? And I say, oh, absolutely. I've been developing this show called Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives. And she says, tell me about it. And I say some stuff. And she says, this is like late on a Thursday or late on a Friday, like, 5, 6 o'clock. And she says, we have a development meeting Tuesday. Get me a write-up on Monday. So I put down the phone, ecstatic that they were interested, but a little nervous because I did not have a show called Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives in development. I had literally made up the title right there and pulled it out of whatever body part you wish to visualize, which is not pretty. I spent the weekend calling restaurants, restaurateurs, diner owners, academics all around the country, did a write-up, submitted it on Monday, and they had their meeting on Tuesday. And shortly thereafter, they picked up a 1-hour special. Now, the reason they did this was they had Guy Fieri, who had won their Food Network Star Contest. To this date, he's the only winner who's ever become significant for them. But at that time, they actually believed that the contest was going to generate a new generation of hosts. And they were intent on making Guy a star. They wanted him to have a primetime show. So they had asked a couple of big deal production companies, the big boys, they wear long pants and ties, had asked the big boys to come up with a couple of proposals. In the meantime, my special was a good way to keep Guy's face out there. Pardon me. Buffy, you can come in here and get a treat, but you can't bark because we're doing a podcast. So anyway, I was kind of a placeholder, time filler. And then they got their proposals from the big boy production companies, and they didn't like them. Nice. So they're stuck. What are they going to do? So that's when they picked up a short first season of Diners. After the first 2 episodes rated surprisingly well, they did, kind of tamp down my expectations by telling me they don't think this show has legs, maybe a couple of seasons, because after all, how many restaurants are there out there? So that's how I accidentally got into food television.
Well, that's so funny. And yeah, I was going to ask you about Guy Fieri because I love him. He's a great personality, but he doesn't seem like if you were going to write up a show about diners, drives, ins, and dives, you wouldn't pick him as the host. Like traditionally, those were like, what was the one where they looked at antiques? Like I'm picturing like the old guy.
I know stuff. Exactly like, what you're
let's
saying.
Go back to the diners, kids, remember the 50s kind of thing. Well, but I love that juxtaposition. I think that's probably what made the show and made it more popular with more people, right?
Here's what happened. They said they want a special, and I said, great, can we talk about a host? I have some thoughts. And they said, no, the guy we want you to use. I knew nothing. I didn't watch the Food Network. I didn't know they had a Food Network Star Contest. And I certainly didn't know who Guy Fieri was. So they said, we want you to use Guy Fieri. He won the contest and he's our guy. I said, okay. Put down the phone, went to my computer, dialed it up. I think it was post dial up, but still. And got this spiky haired, short pants wearing iteration of something. And I took a look at it and I thought to myself, I'm screwed. But look, television, at its core, television is about spending time with people you like. It's voyeurism. It's hanging out. Guy has that amazing personality that people want to hang out with. But more to the point, he has the most God-given television talent I've ever worked with in one package. And I've worked with some big name people. What he didn't have at the time was polish, and he didn't know, technically how do you do this, but he soaked it up like a sponge. And what you see there is unique, which is also something rare in television. Where, I mean, I was talking to someone the other day who wants to pursue a show, and I declined because all this well-intentioned person had was a desire to do a show,
Right.
not a personality that breaks through, not an unusual idea. And look, you can't be too unusual. The fact of the matter is, I didn't invent the concept of doing a trip to a few restaurants. I think I invented any number of things about how to do it, most of which are not even really intellectually visible to the average viewer. They're things we came up with and refined in the TV process, such as the degree to which we used sound to bring you into the cooking. We spent for each half-hour episode, which was really 22 and a half minutes of television, we spent 23 hours in audio sweetening to make sure that you heard every sizzle and every clang, because you can't smell the food on TV. Thus,
Right.
you have to use all of your other senses to make it work. Pardon me, I'm going to throw a treat to the dog. I'll be right back.
Sure,
She's
no
kind
problem.
of a pig. I'm back.
No, it's all good, and it's all for fun here on the Playful Humans podcast for sure. I have a ton of questions about that, many of which I'm sure you've had before and aren't very interesting. But I would just say maybe for you mentioned hanging out with people. I'm wondering what the most fun for you is in the television production process. Why do you love TV?
Well, because you get to make something to your vision. And you get to use all of those different elements. And from a purely technical standpoint, because you get to employ tricks no one sees if you're good. Like Thelma Schoonmaker, who edits all of Scorsese's films, talks about how you can break so many of the technical rules as long as what you're putting together keeps the audience watching the emotion of the action. For example, I will, Buffy, I'm on a podcast. Go on. Look at Goodfellas. I'll ruin it for you. There are cuts all over that movie that break every rule there is, including the scene where the restaurant owner is trying to convince Paulie to take a piece of his business. There's a cut where in one shot from one angle, Paulie's smoking a cigar. And then they cut to another angle and the cigar is gone. But you never notice it because Paulie, you're watching the emotion. That's great editing. When you can do that, it's emotionally fulfilling. And I bet extremely boring to the audience who just tuned us out. But, there's the scene where, what, I amuse you? I'm a clown? Okay.
Yeah.
If you take a look at that scene, but don't look at Tommy, look at Ray Liotta. Throughout that scene, Ray Liotta's hand is down, it's up, he's smoking a cigar, none of that cuts. But it's the emotion of watching Pesci that works. I mean, that's great editing. And there's just
it's the magic. I get it.
Yeah.
I spent a lot of time in radio, and we talk about theater of the mind there.
Yeah.
And on radio, you can do anything because nobody's seeing any of it.
Well, radio. I was in radio for many years. Radio is the ultimate visual trick because you can create all the way back to Stan Freberg and his commercials making the largest sundae in the world. But it's fun. Also, on Diners, I got to do something you rarely get to do in television, which is I got to define a vision. And for the 11 seasons I did the show, I got to make that vision, which that doesn't happen a lot on TV.
Yeah, that's really cool. And I love that. I think that magic is what makes it fun. It's like it's magic trick, right? You know the trick, but the audience doesn't see it or doesn't get they get to experience the trick. And building that for other people is the fun part.
It's a lot of, plus, the business changed technically over the last 15 years. 20 years. What used to be a $250,000 editing suite that no one can afford became a $38 a month subscription to get Premiere Pro on your computer at home. So,
Right.
You can do things today and take as much time as you want. My wife, it's a joke now. When I'm editing something, she'll say, "Just make the edit. Stop previewing it." It's the creative. In fact, that's a remarkable thing. What computer technology has done, the creativity that affords is remarkable.
So I guess that should be our last question here. And then I want to ask you about Food Americana. But
Okay.
last television question is, if you're a young person today, or you're somebody that has a day job and you're like, man, I have an idea for a show, or I would love to make something, or you're just like, I've always wanted to be a producer or a director or something, what would you recommend for them with all the different channels of YouTube or social or other things? Like,
well, what I would what I would recommend today, it's completely changed. The breakout format is YouTube or TikTok. That's where you display your ability to do something, and then somebody sees it at Endeavor or one of the other agencies and goes from there. But understand something, in my day, back when we walked barefoot uphill both ways in the snow, and things were started out more on paper. You'd get pictures from somebody saying, "Oh, I want to do a show about this." Okay, what's in it? Well, it's a show about this. No, it's not. Tell me the stories you're going to tell in episode 1 and how you're going to tell them. And secondly, there's another issue today, which is even more than in the past, it's about the talent. You can't sell a show based on concept. Okay? And again, you can't sell a show on paper anymore. You've got to have proof of performance. And thirdly, if you just want to do something, you're not going to succeed in anything. You have to deeply desire doing something particular. I want to do a show where Joe Schlabotnik skateboards upside down. Okay, get Joe for a couple episodes and shoot a couple episodes. That's how you break in these days.
I think that makes a ton of sense, and it is great advice for everybody. Now, tell me about the book. You said, showing food on TV was hard without the smell. So you took away sight as well, made your job even harder, and wrote a textbook about food. What are we doing with this book?
In some respects, it made it easier. People say, "Why did you write a book?" Because every TV producer thinks he or she has a book in them and pines to do a book, because what people don't realize is writing for TV, I can't speak to the movies because I've never written a movie, but writing for TV is the hardest thing on the face of the earth as follows. It isn't the writing that is visible that tells the story. You can't just sit down at your, I almost said typewriter, you can't just sit down at your computer and go, "It was a dark and stormy night, and then Oedipus killed his father." You can't directly use your words to tell a TV story. What you use your words to do, if you're good, is gently, in a way that no one sees, push the viewer into a moment of reality where sound and picture tell their own story. And then coming out of that, again, gently with an unseen hand, push the viewer to the next moment like that, as you tell your story through what is seen and heard via the camera. That's very difficult. I've been doing it for 50 years. I'm quite proud of how I do it. But at some point you say to yourself, can't I just tell a damn story?
Right.
So, and I'm a career shifter every few years, even though it's mostly been in television. I shift from this job to that. I change my emphasis. And I looked up recently and I said, I'm not getting any younger. Maybe it's time to write a book. So I wrote a book. Which
I love. Yeah, tell me about it. And what's the story here? And what would we learn or get out of Food Americana? Who's it for?
Well, what I would get out of it is you would help fund my daughter's continuing education as she gets her MFA. What you would get out of it, I think, is an entertaining deep dive into why we eat what we eat and how that came to be and what's coming next. My premise for the book, the question I ask myself is, what is American cuisine? mean, we all know it. We all eat it from a pretty specific menu, and it's not that big. What is it? How do we make it? And it turns out that what we did, just as, the old melting pot analogy for immigration, and this is kind of ironic at a time when there's a great political debate about the value of immigration in the United States,
Yeah.
is we have taken a variety of foods from other countries and cultures, because I include the indigenous Native Americans who taught us how to eat lobster, among other things. And we have put them together into an amalgam that is American cuisine. Now, instantaneously, these foods evolve and they change. They evolve because all foodways evolve. I mean, right now in China, one of the most popular dishes among the young people there is scrambled eggs and tomatoes. So that's an evolution from what many Americans think of as Chinese food in China. But A, food evolves naturally. And B, once you take ownership of something, you're going to put your mark on it. You're going to use processed Provel cheese on pizza in St. Louis for reasons no one can understand. You're going to deep fry a sushi roll to make it more palatable to some of the people in Del City, Oklahoma, where your sushi bar and South Station is located. You're going to modify foods, and that's what we've done. And to everything from pizza to bagels to Chinese food, and along the way, the book is filled with little tidbits you had no idea about. I'm very proud of that. There's a lot of, hey, Martha, come here, I didn't know this. Like, for example, where in Europe did Jews first eat lox, bagels, and cream cheese?
Ooh, I would have no idea.
Nowhere in Europe, because Jews in Europe did not eat smoked salmon. It didn't exist there. Smoked salmon only became a thing after the Transcontinental Railroad was completed, which allowed the transport of salmon from the Northwest to the East Coast of the United States. But to get it there, before refrigeration, you had to pack it in salt. Brining it in salt turned it into what we came to know as lox. And then a farmer in upstate New York failed in an attempt to replicate French Neufchâtel cheese. And next thing you know, you got all of my people eating bagels, lox, and cream cheese. I talked to Mel Brooks about this for the book. And he recalled they were very poor when he was growing up in Brooklyn. He said, yeah, if we could have lox, it would be once a week on a Sunday. And then being the comedian that he is, he said, and the economy got better. We had it Tuesday also.
That's great. Now, you mentioned the future, which I think is even more interesting with food. I'm in the middle of, my midlife crisis, renaissance, whatever you want to call it here. And also getting older in your 40s, you realize maybe my diet shouldn't be the same as it is in my 20s.
Well, what are you doing to your diet? What are you changing?
Well, I've tried a little bit of everything. I tried the keto thing and I lost weight, but I didn't find it sustainable. And also I feel like the meat is not all great. So I tried vegetarian for a while and I felt better there, but I also I think my old habits pulled me back in. I was definitely missing some things in that. So I went shopping yesterday at the grocery store and I had no idea what to buy. Everything is bad for you. And
everything is good for you. If you eat the right amount, said the overweight guy. Look, I want to eat good food. And I think we've been trapped into labels. I care far less about whether it's, quote, organic than whether it came from down the road. I live in New Jersey. The best tomatoes on earth are Jersey tomatoes for a brief period of time in the summer. And they're wonderful and they're ugly. I want those. And I live on a tourist island, which has an active fishing port on the north end, where they bring in the finest scallops I've ever had anywhere on earth. And yet, on the rare occasion anymore that I go to a restaurant, I see the visiting tourists eating fried shrimp that was imported from Indonesia. So it's a question of what you choose to eat. Nothing is inherently bad for you. You can have a teaspoon of lard every now and then. But as to where we're going, it's an interesting bifurcated path, because post-pandemic, the drive-through business is just growing by leaps and bounds. You have a whole bunch of companies that never did drive-throughs who are now architecturally planning for them. You have some companies that have done drive-throughs that are building or planning prototypes that are totally drive-through intensive. You can't even come into the building. And a lot of that stuff is fast food. And, you can argue about the benefit or danger of fast food, but I don't think living on fast food is a really good idea. On the other hand, to my surprise, this plant-based thing has really taken hold. Now, it hasn't taken hold among the vast majority of Americans, but it is growing at a rate that I certainly was surprised by. The question is, what's the ceiling to that? Is America going to change its habits in the morning and want to, instead of a frozen breakfast sausage from Jimmy Dean, are they gonna put a meat substitute sausage in the microwave? I don't know, but I do know that there is an increasing interest in a plant-based meal, and there is an increasing awareness. The other night we made pasta at home, and it was out the fridge pasta. So we took out every vegetable that existed that was dying in the refrigerator, and I cut them up and I put them on a baking sheet with salt, pepper, garlic, and oregano and olive oil. Baked them away for quite a while, and we ended up throwing that on top of pasta that we sauced with olive oil that had been cooked with garlic. And I looked up at my wife halfway through dinner. I said, "We're eating a plant-based meal." Now, the following night we had tenderloin, so shoot me.
Right? Yeah. It's probably healthy to rotate through, though. I think that's where I've kind of landed. Is everything's okay, but I just I don't know. I don't need to get political or anything on this show. It's for fun, but I wonder, like, as we go globally, your book is about America, but when we look, like, if the rest of the world ate like we ate, we wouldn't survive. We can't produce food like that for all 7 billion people.
We use an insane proportion of the world's resources to grow our food, and a tremendous amount of that is obviously industrial farming, the way we raise protein. I don't see that changing a whole lot in the near future because, again, not to get political, that's an industry of very, very powerful people with a lot of lobbyists, and that the tail's going to have to wag the dog. The corporate farming industry is going to have to see that America is turning away from what it offers. One of the things I see happening in the future of food has nothing to do with good for you, bad for you. It has to do with the American palate.
Yeah.
And I am gratified to see that I think Americans are getting a little more adventurous in terms of what they're willing to try. For example, Mexican food. Mexican-American food was created out of the food of the norteños, the food of the north of Mexico, after the Mexican-American War, which ended in 1848, when basically America announced to a whole bunch of Mexicans, "You're an American now." And right. Out of that, we ended up with, Tex-Mex, Cal-Mex, it basically a large plate with a lot of gravy and sour cream. Of late, other regional Mexican dishes, because Mexico, like all countries, most countries, is a group of regional cuisines. And there are cuisines that have never gotten here because they weren't the food of the norteños. And that includes something called birria, which is a beef stew, if you will. It started out as goat in central Mexico and then migrated as birria de res, which is beef, to Tijuana. Now, it was not there at the time that we took Tijuana or the land north of Tijuana. So in recent years, birria de res migrated to Tijuana, where it was turned into a kind of crispy taco. and then across the border to Southern California, and then across the country to the East Coast. It is now a remarkably popular dish. You get this incredible crisp taco, because what you do is you take the tortilla, you fill it with the beef and cheese if you want, you flip it over, you crisp the hell out of it on the grill. It was cooked in this spicy chili broth. Some of that is now served in a cup on the side, and it's called consomme at that point. And you take the taco and you dip it in the consomme, and then you shove it in your mouth, and the orange stuff drips down. It's unbelievable. There is a truck in South Philly that just knocks this out of the park.
Wow.
That's the sort of expansion of taste that I hope America is embracing. But there's only so far this country's going to go. I mean,
in a certain amount of time. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, well, look, I was taken to a huge Chinese food hall in Flushing, Queens, pre-pandemic, by a couple of Chinese immigrants to taste the food that people who recently came from China like to eat, because it's the food they miss from back home. And there's an awful lot of artery and tendon and duck foot and duck blood. There's an awful lot of things that are endemic to various regional Chinese cuisines, as to other cuisines in the rest of the world, because we're one of the few countries that isn't nose to tail. We don't like what's inside that animal.
Yeah.
And the food was phenomenal, just incredible. But I don't think a lot of that is going to be embraced by the general American public.
Yeah, I can see
by the
that
way,
for sure.
Duck blood's easier to enjoy if they don't tell you what it is, because
that's what I was going to say. They need to change and market that, right? Because it's all marketing these days.
Hey, when I was a kid, I loved brains until my grandmother told me what I was eating, and then that was over.
So the book is Food Americana. You can follow the story on Facebook and Instagram. Good follow there, and get the book right now. It's out, Food Americana by David Page. And David, our last piece of business here is to play a game. Okay. Would you like to play?
Sure.
All right, we're going to spin our Wheel O Games.
Oh,
and there's 10 on there. You got awkward questions. This is 2 in a row for awkward questions here.
Oh, boy.
But I got some good ones for you. Let's start with this. I'm going to start with one of my favorites. If you could turn one of your friends into an animal for 24 hours, which friend and which animal?
One of my friends into an animal for 24 hours. It would be Caroline, and I would turn her into a hedgehog, because she lived in Britain for a long time and wants you to think she's British, and somehow a hedgehog seems appropriate.
All right, I'll take it. Now, that one's too serious. If you could join the circus, which role would you choose? And
ringmaster, because let's face it, after years of being off camera, I'm a repressed egomaniac.
Yes, that's where I feel like I am too. It's like, it's a producer part of like putting on the show. That's the best part. But then you leave all the dangerous stunts and difficult stuff to other people. You just
well, I didn't say trapeze artist.
Yeah, right. That's what I'm saying. Yeah, that's great. All right, and then finally, if you could go back and whisper in your ear at like 15 and give yourself some advice, what advice would that be?
Get taller.
I don't think you can do that.
You asked what advice I would give myself.
Yeah. So lifts in the shoes or what? Yeah.
Just get taller.
How tall are you?
Yeah, feel taller,
How tall are you?
5'8".
Oh, yeah, that's not bad.
But according to body mass index, if I were 6'7", I'd be right on.
Yeah, I agree. I hate the body mass index, and I'm 6'2". So I don't understand how that works. But awesome. Thank you so much for being here. Any final asks or gives for the audience? Final thoughts?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me. Secondly, eat good food, and as much as you can, get it from mom and pop restaurants. The pandemic just smacked them across the face. Keep those places alive.
You bet. Check out all those diners, drive-ins, and dives near you. That was David Page, creator of that show and author of Food Americana. Find them on Facebook and Instagram, Food Americana, and find Playful Humans at playfulhumans.com. Pretty easy to remember for both of those things. And Playful Humans is for those of you who are feeling a little burned out and bored. You need to get re-energized and re-engaged with life, reconnect with humans again. Great advice and inspiration to do that at playfulhumans.com. Subscribe to the podcast, give us a like, thumbs up, whatever you got. We'll see you next time. Go play.
Don't wait for tomorrow. Live for today. Keep on chasing the sun.